Welcome to Easy Drawing for Beginners. I am Taylor Payton of thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com, and today we are going to be sketching some simple things using simple shapes. The reason for this is because for beginners, everything in drawing can be very intimidating, and if you've ever tried to draw outside of your comfort zone when you are beginning any sort of drawing endeavor, you know that it is a struggle. There are areas and places that you just don't know how to visualize in your mind. You don't know what shapes to use. You don't know how to create things in a way that's going to look believable. So you really want to sometimes dial it back and just focus on simple things like shading and just creating shapes that are appealing and getting practice in areas like that. So for example, we have this snowman. It's totally out of season right now because it's pretty much going into summer at the time of making this video, but I really just wanted to spend some time doing some more non-time-lapsed demonstrations and talk about that process. So all I'm doing here is trying to fit the shapes to one another, and you can see I'm not getting it right the first time, and so I have to erase, and I'm thinking in very simple shapes such as circles, for one, which actually tend to turn into spheres if you shade them properly, and cones for the nose, and we can add some little details if we want, some of those smaller marks once the big shape is in place. We've got this hat, which is a cylinder, or rather it's trying to be. It wasn't the most cleanly constructed cylinder to start with, but we can keep sort of refining it as we go, and if we break the silhouette or the contour line a little bit, we can just clean that up. And then I'm trying to get the hat to sort of place on the head properly by drawing some curved lines along this ellipse here, which is just a circle in perspective. And it's just helping me to figure out what the form lines are going to be. I talk more about form lines in my Beginner Drawing Course 2nd edition. I'm flipping the canvas, as all beginners should, and as everybody should, because it lets you see what areas could use some more love and some more help. And so I'm seeing that some of these shapes are a little less formed than I would like. So I'm just going in and creating some better shapes by refining and erasing them. You can have little stick hands. We're basically just taking these super simple shapes and using them to construct this snowman. I'm thinking again in terms of very basic geometry. There's not a lot of shading, but we can add little marks on the form to kind of give it a little more dimension, give the illusion that there is some more form than perhaps you would see without some of these small little marks on the surface. It's really good to know how to take your shapes and to add marks to the surface of them in order to create a more appealing effect. Of course, we can always start to stylize a little too, add some ridiculous shapes that don't necessarily make a lot of sense, like some of these fantastic square kind of Japanese eyebrows, I think. I saw them in Fooly Cooly, but I don't know where else they show up. I think in various Western cartoons as well. And it's just about having fun with these shapes and making sure you don't have things like tangents where we're kind of cutting really close to some of these lines, touching each other and losing some of that form. So we either got to go beyond most of the form, and then we can cast a little shadow if we want, shade underneath these super eyebrows. And if the eye is in shadow, it's going to be a little darker than if it wasn't. So we're just taking these really basic shapes and casting shadows and just practicing some simple drawings, because the basics, like knowing where to put little occlusion shadows or drawing on the forms of any given object, are pretty much universal, whether we're simplifying things down or we are giving them more detail. So there's kind of a sketchy, fun snowman drawing. I think we can do something similar with, say, like a wooden puppet kind of construction. So I'm going to go again with a rough circle here so that I can have more appealing forms, because I can tell that when I get further down the process, I'm going to have a hard time if I don't like the basic shapes initially. So this is where my eyes are going to be. So you see I got some triangles or some diamonds for that. We can give them like a little I guess, leaf maybe for his hair. So use like a little leaf there. I'm trying to remember what sort of a Pinocchio character looks like from imagination. And I'm just kind of throwing it together with basic shapes. And again, I'm not super worried about the specifics right now, like the details or the quality of the lines, because I'm going to go in with a second version of this drawing right after. You'll see me do that live in this demo as we go through some easy drawings for beginners. So starting with a circle, just sort of changing that around, trying to create some appealing shapes. He's sort of like an apple. You know, an apple's a pretty simple construct. I draw one from life in the Beginner Drawing Course 2nd edition. I believe it's the 5th lesson on still lifes. So it's really important to draw stuff from life so you can learn some of the shapes that sort of exist. And apples that are drawn from life typically come out insanely better than they do apples drawn from imagination, because we're, working with our simple, vague memories of an apple. Unless you've drawn many, many apples from life, it's going to be difficult for you to, replicate that in your imagination. It's just way easier when the details and information is already kind of there for you. So we can still have fun by drawing a character and giving him some, pretty basic shapes here. I'm just using variations of circles. And of course, I like my light to come from up here, so it's kind of a 3/4 lighting setup. It's not lit directly from the side. It's not lit directly from above. It's just sort of a, a key light. We talk more about that in other aspects of BDC or whatever. So I'm just going in. I guess I'll maybe have his arms on his side, sort of a funky little cartoon pose. And use some pretty basic hands for that. And rough in some fingers. They don't got to be perfect right now. I just have to have an idea of where they're going to go as far as the shapes are placed. It's sort of like building out a mannequin before you actually commit to sculpting all of the detail. Of course, it depends on what material you'd be working with. I can't say I've done a lot of whittling or, marble sculpture or anything, but if you were putting this guy up out of clay, you would definitely, have an armature first. And that's kind of what this is. It's a simplified version of what it is we're going to be making. And we just want to make sure that all the pieces are placed as best as we can for that purpose. So a lot of this is pretty ugly. It doesn't contour to the form very nicely with the form lines, meaning that we just are not having the cleanest possible geometry that looks, really regular and really well designed, which is more and more obvious when you're not adding a ton of detail. If you decide to simplify and style, then you're going to run into this issue quite a lot. But again, it's just for fun. We're not really trying to blast off into mastery here. We're trying to get to some beginning drawings. So this now has enough detail for me to lower the opacity. I like to fill it with a different color like red or blue, and then go back in on a layer above. See, I'm at 30% opacity on layer 2 there, and then I'll zoom in and we'll start to think about, cleaner lines, more assured mark making, and some detail. So this could come in the form of just making sure that every line that I strike, I am enjoying. It builds upon the previous line nicely, and you can get very picky with this, but there's definitely a point of diminishing returns. If you find that a line that you're striking doesn't feel so good at a certain angle, sometimes it's just a matter of rotating the canvas. With the R key lets you rotate the canvas or use the rotation tool in this sense, and that's the same for a lot of digital art programs. In Procreate, for example, you can just rotate it with your fingers, as many of the Apple products permit you to do in various applications. So that's a little bit better there. It's going to collide with his little leaf hair here, so I'm probably going to have to redesign some of the leaf hair shape. Let's see, we'll finish off the brim here, and then I'll take the leaf shape and find a way to add it in later. For now, I'm going to draw in the head and try and strike a line that I like. That one's pretty good. I'm just following the contour here, meaning the outside of the form that we're choosing. And then I'm getting up to the ear. Not trying to use a lot of straight lines in this guy. He's kind of a curved line design. I talk about different qualities and types of line in the Beginner Drawing Course 2nd edition and the 1st edition as well. And if you dig around on the channel, you can find some information about that as well. It's basically just knowing different types of line and the kind of feelings that they convey in order to give your drawings a particular effect or feeling. It's all about mark making. It's the same as, using different techniques on a guitar, for example, different tones, different pedals, different notes and scales. Once you understand the tools that fundamentally affect what you're doing, you can begin to play around a lot more. So I'm going to give him some rounder eyes. They're not going to be quite as triangular as I initially designed. And I'd like him to have some pretty notable eyelashes just so he can feel a little more appealing. This is just going into some character design basic stuff, some stuff I talk about in my character drawing course. Since he's a male character, I'm not going to go too heavy with the eyelashes because then we sort of diverge into more feminine territory, which I don't want for this character. It's fine in other scenarios where you want a character to appear more feminine. In this case, I'm trying to strike a balance, and I don't want him to look too tired either. I'm also not a huge fan of the size of that other eye, so I'm just going to scale it up, and that looks more proportionate to me. Proportion is a huge, huge deal when we're talking about drawing. So I know that even as a beginner, this might seem pretty intimidating to draw, simply because you have increasingly complex shapes that are starting to emerge and increasingly complex marks and somewhat of a clean line art effect. And all these things will come with time and discipline and diligence. You can practice them in isolate and then bring them together in your more final form of things. I think I'd like his eyes even a bit bigger, and I don't think that the eyes are sitting quite right in the skull, quote-unquote skull really, because we have this have that cheekbone there, so if I'm emulating real life, the eyes would be up higher. The eyebrows make him look a little older than I want him to, as well as the amount of detail I'm using around the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify some of those things, not give him as much detail. I kind of think I can even come up with a better eye design based on what I had before, because this is still really appealing to me. And if I'm not capturing the essence of what I want, then I'll just restart. So you'll see me do that quite a bit. Sometimes I'll leave the area alone even and come back later if I can get some points of advancement on other areas of the drawing. So for example, that could be, these nice sort of buck-ish teeth. You can have some little details in there. Now that the big shapes are there, make them look like you've got some wood smilers. And give him a nose. This is going to be a little difficult to do just based on how long the line has to be and to be struck. So I'm going to have to find my angle for this, which could take a couple attempts. And you're starting to get the point here, though. It's essentially just, even though I'm not using reference here, I am going in and just finding the shapes I like and elaborating upon those shapes once they've already been laid in. So now he's got a nose, and add a couple marks to that for fun. Those marks are kind of flattening the nose, making it appear flatter than I'd like, so maybe I'll move them higher up and contour them a different way. So mark making or slight hatching is good for inferring that sort of form. You can do a little at the end as well. And I've always liked that little thing where you have a little like a little imperfection there, like he was whittled with not fully sanded down kind of technique, and have a little leaf there, kind of make a little more character for him. In Andrew Loomis's book, which I learned to draw from, I think it might have been Fun with a Pencil or Creative Illustration. One of the things he kind of teaches is the 5 C's and the 5 P's. So the 5 C's, I'm going to get into those here. They are the concept, so the idea, the contour, which is the outer lines, the character, which is what he defines as rendering the character in light, making sure that you have the characters rendered with a light source, making their features appear, rather than just thinking only predominantly on line. You're thinking, mark making for the lines. And I like those eyebrows. Those are kind of nice and big and more fun, more what I'm going for, kind of that old school, kind of a little bit more of an old school animation vibe, I guess. And if I had too many marks, it kind of makes him look less like a kid, so I'm really trying to avoid that. He already looks maybe a little older than I was anticipating. So there's kind of a fine balance. I'm getting a little picky here with like the character design stuff, but mostly I want to talk about the drawing basics. So again, we have the concept, the contour, the character, the consistency, meaning everything rendered out in a way that feels like it's all part of the same picture plane, regarding light, regarding form, where shadows are falling, etc. And what was the other C? That's 4 of them. All right, so I remember it is construction, which is what we're doing now. We're constructing a character out of basic shapes and trying to make those shapes have form by creating specific little notches and marks and areas where lines are kind of overlapping in specific ways. This is an easier drawing for beginners, but obviously it's not an easy drawing. That would be the more simple shapes. That's like level 1 would be the snowman, just kind of designing what you want around those spheres and the cone and the hat and whatnot. But this guy, again, is a 2-step drawing process, meaning that it's already more complex, but it's really important to know as a beginner that you should be drawing over your drawings and not going with the first version of the drawing, because your marks are never going to be quite as certain. And even as I'm talking and sort of getting a little lazy here, my lines aren't connecting as well, they're not as consistent. That's just because this is a demonstration mostly. It's often very difficult to take a beginner concept all the way to finish, just in terms of time and in terms of lesson stuff, because oftentimes I don't need to finish something to demonstrate the concepts of what I'm talking about. So, and it doesn't benefit my audience, so I do most of my finished work for clients. That's where I kind of get my finished time in. But when it comes to sketching out this stuff that gives you a better idea of how drawing sort of works, then I don't really need to push the polish unless that is the like core of the lesson. So right now I'm just trying to get it to the point where it kind of shows that I'm creating overlapping shapes, and using those overlapping shapes, constructing them in a way that feels like they actually have some relative space to them, because oftentimes beginners will flatten stuff out, which is why we use things like guides and drawing on the form and surface. It just really makes it easier to give ourselves an idea of how some of these things are gonna kind of look as we are able to lay in lines that we like. So I'm just changing the hair shape a little bit. It's less of a leaf, more like classic Pinocchio, I guess, like a little swoop, but it can still be a leaf. I still want it to be a leaf, so I'm going to add little marks in it that denote that it is a leaf. So we got the stem that runs through the leaf, and some of those veins as well, just little marks there. And then we're gonna have to add little shadows and occlusions in certain places to help things pop off the form. You can always look for little places to add more form. But yeah, you get the point. It basically boils down to constructing things out of shape and having a concept in mind that you can construct based off of. That way, you can begin to give things more character, more consistency, and just generally experience better drawing results. So again, if you would like to enroll in my beginner drawing course 2nd edition, that would be most appreciated. I really love when people are able to take their drawing skills to the next level, because I have a bunch of fundamentals and principles and basics that I've picked up from masters and adapted for people who are just starting out, and it has been a rewarding journey thus far. So if you're interested in that, that's in the description box. Other than that, I hope you will hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share the video if you'd be so kind. It really helps the channel. Alright, so after some little tweaking and detailing and mark making, we're pretty much ending up here. It was really fun to make this video for you. I hope you'll subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, or share the video in your favorite drawing community or on social media. It really helps the channel grow, really helps get more people into deeper levels of drawing and creative expression. And if you want, you can still check out the description box for more of the courses on character drawing and design, as well as just beginner drawing action in general. I guess with that, I'll say take care and happy drawing.